Now, what part of the story? I love this from the No Safe Alternative. That's the new title of your first book.
Yes, sir.
But and that book is at this point in time when you're entering the Bureau, have you already written that? You haven't written that until you're with the Bureau, but the experiences of that book, were they during your time in the military?
Some of them.
Okay.
There are, I guess I would call them Turculary chapters. They're italicized chapters that you can read. There are 3 of those.
Right.
That have 2 of them have to do with my time in the military. 2 of them. Maybe only one of them has to do with the time in the military. Yeah, only one's I was in the military.
The one excerpt you sent me is this letter to Muhammad.
Yeah, that was later on.
Okay, so I'll save that because, I mean, this is so well written.
Oh, thank you.
I love it.
No, I read it too. Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's fantastic. But maybe as we go along, we can build the context around that. Of course, people should go read the book, but
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know if I can read the whole thing, but it's a really cool concept in a way. And I'm assuming was this a real, is it a real person or just kind of a,
no,
this is a real guy.
He was a real guy until he wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's continue the story. And then if you could, paint the picture around that letter.
Okay.
Would be awesome.
So I get in the Bureau. I asked to go to San Francisco. And it's funny because, everyone's experience is the same in this regard. The Bureau gives you a letter. It says, okay, number your field offices you want to go to. 1 through, 56?
Yep.
Your number 1 office. If you could go to any office in the Bureau, what's number 1? What's number 2? What's number 3? And then all the way down to where's the last place in the Bureau you want to go. Because we have these field offices all over the country, and they generally tend to be in areas where the population is higher. So in my experience, the first 10 are easy and the last 10 are easy, right? If somebody says to you, what are the top 10 cities in the country you want to go to, you can probably come up with that list. And if I say to you, where are the last 10 places you want to go in this country, you can probably come up with that list.
Yeah.
But when I say, look, you got 56 things you got to put down, and what's number 31 versus number 32? When you're looking at Oklahoma City versus Omaha.
Flipping a coin, right?
Right. I mean, maybe some people can make that's a real obvious decision. Well,
yeah.
I'm a coastal guy from California. At that point, do I really care? I don't know. So that was my experience. I filled it out.
And there was always a strategy too when you're going through the academy is, okay, yeah, the last class said, group them like Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, and that's how you should group them. And, there was always somebody who had, this is how they do it. Yeah. This and
it never worked out.
No.
Well, and none of us knew what the hell we were talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
The guys with 6 weeks are listening in the academy or listening to the guys with 8 weeks in the academy.
Exactly.
That experienced dude in the other class. Yeah, we didn't know what we were doing.
Did you really want to go back to San Francisco, though?
At the time, I did.
You did?
Because you keep in mind, I've been on the other side of the planet for ever. And I kind of wanted to go home. I still had a few distant relatives that were still alive then, still in the area.
That makes sense.
So I put everything down. And, my selections went San Francisco, San Diego, Sacramento, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle. You could see it's pretty obvious I wanted. And then, Las Vegas and, kind of creeped.
Vermont was at the bottom.
I think Vermont, for me, well, first of all, Vermont was a resident agency. So it was a sub-office out of our Albany division in upstate New York. I think I went back later and checked, and it was 18 for me.
Okay.
Because I did those first 10, and I did the last 10. And then I got in that middle section, and I had a good friend of mine, Stuart, in the book, who was in Connecticut. And he was really one of the few people I knew in the Bureau at the time I was applying. And I was like, well, I get up to Albany, I guess I can hang out with Stuart. I mean, that's literally the thought process, right?
Right.
So I just kind of numbered them all out and sent it in. And the other thing I kept coming back to was I was in the Army. I asked the Army to send me to Korea, and they sent me to Germany. And then they sent me to the desert twice. So I'm like, if I can do that,
yeah, sure.
I don't really want to go to New York City, but I can.
Yeah.
I can survive that. So they come back and they say, yeah, you're going to Albany. And I'm like, oh, God. And I talk all about that in the book. All right. And so I'm prepping to move to Albany. The wife's changing her job to Albany. We're getting ready to do a house hunting trip to Albany. And then the SAC, the special agent in charge, who's the number one guy in any given field office, he gets a wild hair, so he sends word down for me to call him. So I call him back, and it's been 6 weeks since we talked the first time. And he said, "Yeah, you're coming. You're coming to Albany. I got a desk for you. You're going to put you on. We're going to work some background cases. Then we're going to move you over to violent crimes and major offenders." And I'm like, "All right, well, that's cool. Do some VCMO work, neat." And then he calls me back. I call him back, and he's like, "Hey, changed my mind. You're going to Burlington, Vermont. You'll really like it. It's a lot of fun up there. Have a good time. Best of luck to you." And I hang up, and I'm like, now I got to call my wife and tell her, "Hey, you remember how you didn't want to go anywhere on the East Coast, and we're going to the East Coast? You remember how you got it together to go to Albany? Yeah, well, shit can't all that. We're going to Vermont." So that was a bone of contention, was probably the polite way to say that. She wanted to please
But you can go skiing there.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, you can go different type of snow.
Very
but-
much.
But
And
you can go skiing.
yeah, when coming from California,
Right,
East Coast hills.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my wife's a Carolina. My wife now is a Carolina girl, and she insists that the Appalachians are the oldest mountain chain in the world, which I agree. But they're hills.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I said, let me show you the Sierra Nevadas. Let me show you the Rockies.
Right.
Yeah.
And then tell me about how the
Or the Alps.
or the Alps, right? But then tell me about how these are mountains.
Right.
When was the last time somebody died trying to summit Grandfather Mountain? She doesn't want to hear that. Okay. So anyhow, I get up to Vermont, and I stayed there for 10 years. I had a great time. I eventually learned to snowboard up there. I was never great at it, but I
And you didn't break anything, did you?
Didn't break anything. Tried
Tried
real
hard.
hard. Never managed to quite do it. But I made a good selection of friends up there. Got into competitive handgun shooting up there. Did graduate school up there. So where I got my master's and my doctorate up there. Did some great work. I mean, the nice thing about the small RAs, and I know you'll know this, and working in rural communities is I go grab somebody in New York City or Miami or Chicago or Los Angeles, and they're moving 5 kilos of coke. Nobody cares.
Right.
Nobody even notices. But you come to a town like Burlington, Vermont, or Huntsville, Alabama, and you grab somebody with 5 keys.
Oh, that's big.
That's huge.
huge.
Right.
You just drove the price of coke in the region up
Right.
because you just took off 5 keys.
Right.
And it's above the fold front page news for a day or two. So you really feel like, in my case, I don't want to speak for you, but in my case, you felt like you were making a difference. You were having a positive impact on your community. And I ended up working an awful lot of crimes against children. After telling my boss I didn't want to work, he said, "What do you want to work?" I said, "Well, I'll pretty much work anything, but please don't want to work crimes against children."
That's what you got.
And that's what I got. And I detail that in the book.
And I got that too.
Did you?
And I my crimes against children, I arrested actually 3 different department police officers for
Yep.
child porn.
Child porn.
Yeah. I grabbed a few myself, and one who was in grad school with me, he was going to transition from being a cop to being a principal, elementary school principal, and grabbed him. I put a guy in the top 10 list and got him. So he's out now, but he's having a hard time, I think. Rough life for that guy. But while I was up there, obviously 9/11 happened, and I want to say that was in September of 2001. In 2003, I got the opportunity to go to Guantanamo Bay as an interrogator.
Okay.
And so I went down there and I did my time interrogating these guys. Worked every day that I was there except for one. I went out and I dove Guantanamo Bay one day because I was like, I got to do that. I'm here. So, that to me was a great course in interrogation, interviewing techniques. There were behavioral analysis unit guys down there, and I would always make sure I had one watching my interviews, not because I necessarily needed their insight in the guy I was interviewing, but because I wanted this 20, 25-year agent to critique my technique and give me a feedback after the fact, and that was great.
I had a couple friends that did just that as well, and some of the big things that they talked about were, one, the bad guy doesn't speak English, so you're having to use the translator, but you're interviewing him, and even though you also had to watch the translator, making sure they're translating what I'm saying or asking, because that's. And then the other thing that they told me was, barring interviewing the bad guys and gals here in Huntsville, it's a whole different mindset of
Absolutely.
of the Middle East, right?
Yeah, there's cultural differences. And
Right.
in Gitmo, it wasn't just Afghans. It wasn't just Saudis. It wasn't just Pakis. I mean, it was from people from all over the world. We had a couple guys from England, Australia.
Right.
I mean, it was truly a global jihad that these guys were coming back for. And in talking about what we called terps, the interpreters, I eventually found one named Hamid that I worked with a lot. Well, I named him Hamid in the book. He was great because he hated the Taliban, hated them with a burning passion. He was a native Afghan,
Right.
and had been forced to flee first by the Russians. He'd fought against the Russians and then fought against the Taliban and then had to split. He was a U.S. citizen, but he would tell me all the time. He would do the translations literally, and then while looking at the guy, he'd be talking to me and say, "My friend, he is lying right now. He is telling me that I should listen to him, that we are brothers in Allah, and that I should, convince you that this is the way, that these things he is saying, but he is lying." And he wouldn't look at me to say these things. Or if he did, he would look back at me and say, "This is what he said." Okay. And then a couple times he's like, "If you leave me with him 10 minutes, I will get the truth." I'm like, Hamid, as much as that would appeal to me, because you remember how angry everybody was, even in 03, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my friends heard that I was coming down, that I was going to Gitmo. I can't tell you how many people said, "Look, dude, if you get a chance, throw a couple in for me, will you?" I'm like, that's not what we're doing down there. But
So one of my questions to you is, because I didn't go to Gitmo, but in Gitmo, we had stories back here that said, hey, they would spit on the soldiers and spit on the, and do nasty stuff just to see a rise from our troops.
here's what I can say about that. I never saw
You never saw it?
any abuse. What I will say is this: I talked to a lot of the troops,
Right.
and they acted like convicts anywhere.
Right.
So they
Right.
would
Right.
spit. They would, they'd try to gas you sometimes.
Yeah.
The prisoners gassing, this is kind of vulgar, but they will defecate in their hands or urinate in their hand in a cup or something and throw it through the bars at the guards. One of the things that I do know that they had to do was they had to change the fencing between their cells. And what their cells were when I was there, and it's changed since then, were long buildings about the size of a Quonset hut with a tin roof, almost like a carport, open sides, because it's Guantanamo Bay. It's like 65 and sunny every day. And they each had a room like this would probably fit 3 of their cells. So their cells were probably 5 feet across by 7 or 8 feet long. And they had a cot, and they had a few items. They were given a brush and a copy of the Quran in Arabic, because the Quran must be printed in Arabic. So these guys that didn't read and write Arabic were just out of luck. But they had cyclone fencing between the cells at first. And then they kept catching these guys having sex through the fence.
Oh gosh.
And, and I don't want to get graphic about this, but you can let your imaginations run wild. And so they're like, yeah, this isn't going to fly. So they ended up having to change the mesh from cyclone fencing to a much tighter weave fencing. So they could still see each other and talk to each other, but they couldn't fit so much as a fingernail through that mesh. And then, to have these guys then tell me about how they're morally superior, I was just like, all right, settle down, hero. Settle down. But you met some really interesting people. One kid I interviewed a juvenile down there who'd been caught on the battlefield. He was eventually released. And a year later, when I found myself in Afghanistan with the Bureau, he got caught on the battlefield again. And they had him buckled up in Bagram. And I'm like, oh, you got to let me go interview him. He said, that'd be awesome. I talked to him last year in Gitmo. For him to see me again, he'll lose his mind. They wouldn't let me do it.
No.
But I did my time in Gitmo, and that was very educational. And it really gave me a real insight into just sort of the mindset of these guys. To your point earlier, they think so much differently about us, about their role, their willingness to die, and what they're doing. Some of them would tell me, look, I remember one guy, he tells me, I was a prisoner of the Saudis for 3 years. He says, they used to beat me and torture me and pull my fingernails out. He says, what are you going to do to me? Not feed me? He's like, okay.
Was the extent of your training as an interrogator in the Bureau, or did you get some of that in the military?
No, I didn't get any. Because the military has interrogators.
Sure.
And battlefield intelligence gathering is vastly different than law enforcement intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
If I'm interviewing you as a soldier on the battlefield, well, I want you to tell me where the machine gun bunker is, and maybe what unit you were with, and where you were last week. And I'm looking for more tactical intelligence. I'm sure there are guys who do strategic intelligence and to some extent strategic intelligence interviews, but that's not the way you want to interview a guy if you're talking to the head of finance for Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
Then you need a guy like us, and that's because I want to fully exploit you. I want to get every drop of information out of you I can, and I'm not going to do that if you hate me.
Yeah.
You're not going to give me. People don't confess to their worst enemies; they confess to their best friends.
Sure.
And so my approach was never, I'm going to threaten you. I'm not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
My approach was always very similar to what I took to bad guys on the street that I pulled off for bank robbery or anything else. It's like, look, you're on the edge of and you're going to recognize a lot of this. You're on the edge of a very deep, dark hole. Your decisions have brought you to this unfortunate pass, right? And you're about to fall in. And the only hope you have is me.
Yeah.
I'm it. And you can either cooperate or you can not cooperate. Those are your two choices. Mm-hmm. And don't, what I tell the guys here is ask your attorney if any of this is a lie, because it's not. Your attorney's going to tell you to cooperate with me. But I would tell these guys, here's what's going to happen. The guy tells me, what are you going to do? You can't torture me. The Saudis tortured me. I said, you're right. What I can do is tell you this. I'll talk to you today, and I'm going to make notes about what happened, our conversation. And if you don't talk to me, I'm going to write that down. And then I'm not going to come see you for a week. If you don't talk to me then, okay, I'll write that down. And then I'm not going to come talk to you for a month. And if I come back and you don't talk to me, I write that down, and then I won't come back for 6 months. If you don't talk to me, I won't come back for a year. And eventually, I'm just going to stop coming back. And while you're doing that, sitting in that hole, getting older, I'm going to retire. I said I'm going to go someplace and fish with my 5 sons. I always told them I had 5 sons.
5 sons.
And I'm going to grow old in the bosom of my family. I'm going to meet my grandchildren. I'm going to die. Meanwhile, back home for you, your wife is sleeping with another man. Your children are calling another man father. They will forget you. I said, within 2-3 years, they won't know who you are. They will say, oh, my father disappeared. He went off. The war was more important than I am. And you'll still be here. I said, in 10, 15, 20 years from now, you'll have kidney problems. And the FBI and the United States government is so mad at you for what you've done that they will give you dialysis. They will give you chemotherapy.
Keep you alive.
They'll give you open heart surgery just to extend your miserable existence one more week, one more month. And you will die in this hole. And someday they'll bury you, and there will be no marker, and no one will know, and they will have forgotten, and no one will celebrate you. If that's the way you want to go, inshallah, go with God, have fun. I said, or you can talk to me.
Yeah.
We can get all this information out, and once I have all the information you have to share, you go home. It worked a lot. It was surprising how often it worked. And that and a cheeseburger. I mean, these guys, again, they're like convicts, right? They're locked up, and all they're getting is this institutional food.
Did some wait or go like the 6 months?
Well, I wasn't there 6 months, so if they went
that's
6
true.
months,
You don't know,
I
right?
don't know. And that I think might have been a tactical error on our part. I think we would have been better served to have our interrogator stationed down there for multiple years and stay with the guy, because what they could end up doing is practice their spiel with you,
Yeah.
and then you rotate home. Then a new guy comes in. Well, now
He's got to develop the rapport
Right.
and everything else again.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that makes sense.
So I think that we probably would have done better if we had permanent party interrogators stationed in Guantanamo Bay for 3 years with an extension of 4 to 5, and work the same people. But because it would take me 2 or 3 meetings just to get to sound the guy out, figure out what his hot buttons were, where he's lying, what his tells are for when he is lying, and to check the story, right? He gives me a story, just like any convict, any criminal, you check everything they say, any source of information. Mm-hmm. You tell me this guy's blue, I'm going to go check, right? So
where does it take you when you get back?
I go back to Vermont and right back into working cases. 2 flights later and I'm home, and the next day the boss is like, hey, what's going on with that armored car robbery? But a year later, headquarters folks reached out for me and said, hey, you did good work down in Gitmo. You want to go to Afghanistan? And I said, sure. I mean, and understand the difference between the Bureau and the military. The military can just say, hey, you're going to Afghanistan. And you go. The FBI has to say, well, are you willing? Will you go?
Yeah.
And if you say no, okay, then you don't have to go. Well, that makes for a very short list of people who have the skill sets that they want and who are willing to go. And I was in both categories. And having already been in the first Gulf. I wasn't terrified of the idea of going to a combat zone. Having worked in Guantanamo Bay, I was kind of excited about the idea of doing more of the same, but closer to the pointy end of the stick.
Yeah.
So they said, yeah, you want to go? And I said, yeah, I'll go. When? And they said, 3 days.
Wow.
I was like, no, I can't do 3 days. I got to talk to mama at home. I got to close up some cases. I got to move things around. I can't just stick my squad, 5 other guys with all the casework I have. I got to shut some things down, move them around. So they gave me 10 days, and I did my thing. I got stuff moved and transferred around. I had a boss at the time he's in my book. I don't think he was in danger of winning the Nobel Prize for Physics anytime soon. He was a bit of a sticking point, but apparently headquarters sort of bowled over him. So I'm told. I wasn't privy to any of the conversations, so that's
yeah.
all rumor. But by hook or by crook, I ended up in Afghanistan, shortly thereafter. And there weren't a whole lot of us over there at the time. The Fly team was one of the groups that the FBI put together as a sort of a result of 9/11. And it was a bunch of people who were trained extensively in counterterrorism. And they had people over there that were moving around doing things. HRT had some people over there. The hostage rescue team had some people over there that were embedding with the higher tier folks, from other agencies and doing really specified high-end, high-value target hits, HVT hits, going out looking for those guys.
Is this like 2005?
This is
2004. Okay.
So it wasn't a fully developed theater in the vernacular at that point. It was still kind of the Wild West. The Bureau hadn't come up with a ton of procedures at that point. Later on, the Bureau would embed you with a unit. So you would go over, and the 75th Rangers were there. You went in with them, and you stayed with them.
Yeah.
When I was there were only 3 or 4 of us that were actually rolling out of the wire. And, so like one day, okay, the Marines are doing something in Jalalabad. Fly down there. I'd go out with them for a day or two. Fly back to Bagram. We had people in Kandahar and we had people in Bagram. And then, hey, you know what? The big army is sending out a unit to do this. So you'd fly to some other part of the country, get in with them, spend a day or two with them. Oh, hey, SF needs somebody. Go fly over there. So I was there for about 100 days, and it doesn't sound like super long time, but there wasn't a whole lot of downtime. You just jumped around a lot, and we were all doing it. I mean, we were just zip all over the country, and you did a lot of work, just worked hard. And in my mind, that's what I was here to do.
Yeah,
I wasn't here to sightsee. I was here to work, and you did.
And somewhere in that process is what leads to this letter to Muhammad.
Yeah. I was out doing a presence patrol, and part of it took us through an urban area. Urban by local standards. There's probably 3,000 people in the town, 5,000 people. It wasn't a huge town. And I was embedded with, it might have been the Marine Corps at the time. I think it was. Yeah. And it was just me and a couple of Marines in the vehicle, and then an Afghan National Army vehicle. And those guys, no, it was National Army. It was police. It was local police. The Afghans have a very fluid sense of loyalties. So, they would work for you, and they wouldn't see it as treacherous if somebody else if I came along and paid them more money for them to just change sides. And then you come back later and go, hey, you should come back and work for me. You give them more money, and they come back and work for you. To them, that's fine. There's no treachery in there. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Whereas you and I kind of look at that and go, you treacherous SOB. So, yeah, we were driving along, and we were doing things, and we got into this crowded area. And this kid just came out of the crowd with a gun. And, it's one of those things where I had my zone. I was watching, right? Because you're in a crowd.
You're vigilant.
Right, everybody is, because you don't know who's going to pop up and do what. I had a good friend that took an RPG, skipped across the hood of his vehicle, out of a crowd. So you just never know, right? Just never knew. And, the result was what you read about in the book.
I want to read an excerpt. I keep doing that wrong button. I'm sorry about that, Kerry.
That's all right.
It's let's see, right here. I'm going to read this part. Your gun came up, but at that point, it was moving far too slowly. I am sure that it was going as fast as you could make it, but mine moved faster. Your weapon of choice was a clunky, old, heavy revolver, outmoded technology of a bygone era. yet still capable of performing its assigned task. My weapon was the finest that current technology could craft, lightweight, fast-moving, and hard-hitting. Without conscious thought, my sight was centered on your face, and the round struck you just above your right eye. I saw it hit and watched your head snap back while the material that made you who you were scattered across those around you. I see that scene over and over again, both asleep and awake.
Yeah.
And then later you go on to describe how that's something you think about when you are woken at night. You know, is there what level of PTSD or trauma did that put upon you?
Well, it's funny because when I went to Afghanistan, I'd finished my master's and I'd started my doctorate. And my thesis for my master's and my dissertation for my doctorate both centered around improving the way we teach cops to administer deadly force. Mm-hmm. And part of that is dealing with the aftermath. Right? I know that if we do more training up front before the event, that we can save a lot of suffering and difficulty after the event, if that makes sense. And we know that from the current research. We just don't do a very good job of instilling that into our training paradigms. So I was reading a lot about that at the time, and I don't think of myself, I'm from a generation like you two guys where you don't really play the victim card, right?
Yeah.
It's just, if I'd have gotten shot through the leg and I had a limp the rest of my life, I'd be like, I got hurt in Afghanistan, and I just walk with a limp, right? No big deal. So when I got back, and mind you, I have the Gulf War experience, I have other shooting experiences during Afghanistan. It's the only one that I ever thought about. It's the only one that ever, obviously I can think about the other ones, but the only one that ever kind of popped up unbidden was this one. Because I felt such an overwhelming sense of pity for that kid. And a kid he was. I mean, he looked like he was 15. Some of that's going to be attributed to just the rough circumstances he grew up in and growing up malnourished and everything. He could have been anywhere from 15 to 25 for all I know.
Right.
But he was young, certainly younger than me, certainly not trained. Looked like an old Webley revolver, an old British big, huge chunk of metal. But, as soon as it started to come up, the fight's on. And I'm already in my shoulder, right? So he was pretty much cooked. He's got no training. I've got a ton of training. Plus, I was competing real hard in shooting sports at the time, so I had a ton of time on my own training. I was a firearms instructor for the Bureau. You start stacking up the amount of training and effort I'd put into doing exactly what this kid was making me do versus what he had brought to the table. It was sad. It was pitiable.
Yeah.
And whoever put that gun in that kid's hand, that's who I'd like to find.
Yeah.
And I talk about that in there.
Because he's just responding to how he grew up and his
And what he's being told.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
He's being told, hey, these are the bad guys.
Yeah. And I don't know. Somebody may have, his house may have blown up, and somebody said, who blew up your house?
right.
It's guys that look like him. That's who blew up your house. I mean, you know how easy, you have 4 kids.
Mm-hmm.
You have kids. You know how easily they are manipulated, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and so he just got in with somebody with a level of cynicism
Right.
that's hard to really put into words. And he used the kid's religion to do that to him. And that just, to this day, 20 years later, pisses me off.
Yeah.
So, to answer your original question, I had some dreams about it for several years. Fortunately, I have amongst my cadre of friends, people of all kinds of different backgrounds, including psychiatric. And I was able to talk to some of them. God knows I didn't want to tell the Bureau that I was seeking psychiatric help, right? Because next thing you know, they're ganking your security clearance.
And then they take your gun.
And then they take your gun.
That's right.
And more importantly, they take your AVP.
Oh, yeah. That's
Right?
exactly
Take
it.
a pay cut. Can't have that. But if I'm just having a casual conversation with a lifelong friend, that's a different animal.
Yeah.
At least that's how I played it in my head. So, yeah, that helped. I mean, it's hard. I think it's a very difficult thing in law enforcement for us to talk about events like this. And I talk about it in my book quite a bit about the need to break that down. We need to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And not just from a therapeutic standpoint, but from a training standpoint. Let's push this information out instead of making everybody who kills somebody as a cop over the years have to reinvent the wheel. They've got to go through this whole process of learning all these things again. And we know that some of these guys that have these events don't do well with them. And some of them in extreme cases self-medicate. They turn violent on
Yeah.
the people they love. That you end up with domestic problems, and in extreme cases, you end up with suicide.
Yeah.
And we could prevent some of this with better training on the topic.
Yeah.
And I came to really become a proponent of that. I was already a proponent sort of theoretically. But after the fact, I really became, because I was able to compare the military's response to my first Gulf experience
Yeah.
and the FBI's response to my time in Afghanistan. And they were night and day.
Sure.
You go to war with the Army and you come back and they give you medals and they give you a combat infantryman badge and a combat patch on your shoulder, and they start talking to you about, well, hey, LT, you're the captain. He's been there, especially after the Gulf, because not everybody went at the time, but not everybody in the Army had gone. And so now your opinion is valued, right? People are asking you questions. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about? Well, yeah. And if you start speaking about something, they listen, right? So you get a lot of validation, a lot of approbation, a lot of support.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody around you, especially when you first come back, they all had the same experience. So you have that built-in network of people. And plus, just the organization in general values combat experience. If you've been there,
Sure.
that's what we're here to do, is to go to combat. And if you've been to combat, good on you.
And the Bureau at that time was sending people over was a whole, paradigm shift. Bureau's going to send people over. Okay, what are they going to do?
Yeah. What's our jurisdiction?
What's the jurisdiction?
Well,
and
And the benefit too, and I think you mentioned this on a podcast, is that now there is no like state laws or something that like you would have to if you were in Ohio or in Texas, and now it's just like it's a different ball game. You're overseas, right, in Afghanistan, and a lot of those laws that may trip people up on what their rights are, carrying a firearm, are like out the window. Correct?
Yeah, the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution suspends us from having to obey state laws in the course of our federal investigations.
Right.
Which can sometimes irritate the hell out of state and local officials. But, we don't tend, at least in my experience, Bureau doesn't tend to lord that over people. So state laws are rarely an issue for us. They can be sometimes, but not often. But over there, to his point,
Yeah.
we weren't real clear on where the lines were.
True. Yeah.
Same within Gitmo. So what we all defaulted to was...
And so in the military, too, was the same thing, right? The military was trying to figure out, okay, how do we intertwine the Bureau? Then the Bureau started coming up with, okay, we're going to do a pre-deployment training. I did a pre-deployment training when I went over to Pakistan, and when they did it for 2 weeks, and they were trying to, and they were doing lessons learned from people that initially went in to Iraq. And so I did I think it was a 10-day or 2-week thing up in over in St. Louis, Salt Lake, and went through all that of okay, this is what's going on. How do we react? Because Bureau, up until this time, besides the Miami shooting, we didn't have, what was going to happen if we get involved in a shooting, driving down the road. Well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
what year was that?
That was 2010.
Okay. So in 2004, when I
Jeez.
was over there, this is where these guys that ended up teaching those classes are going over. And, like we all knew, okay, don't put it in paper, right? Because as soon as you write it down,
Right.
it's going to get back to DC and people are going to lose their minds. So there were days when I would come back in and, hey, I left with 300 rounds. I'd come back in with a bunch of empty magazines and go, I need 300 rounds. And they go, okay, here you go. No questions. Nobody's talking about it, right?
Nothing significant to report.
Nothing significant to report. And we just didn't talk about it. There were times you come in, all the windows blown out in your car, and you're like,
I need more.
we need more bullets. I think maybe a bird strike. I don't know what happened. All the was wrong.
First.
And until somebody wrote it down one time, and then the whole world came from together. And I think it's a much better system that they eventually came up with. But back when I was there, it wasn't like that.
Again, it was because the Bureau was it was in the infancy of
Sure.
sending people over. Because at the end of the day, the Bureau was also wanting to get going back to interviews, and what is the intel we can get of this network? What is the things that we can get out? What's the forensic stuff that we can get out to exploit to the high value targets and things like that?
Yeah.
And like when I was there, for example, the value of sending in soldiers in. So what would happen is, okay, we're going to go hit Abu Bai. We're going to go hit his compound. So you tell a bunch of, hard dick Marines or Army guys, I want you to go to this compound. I want you to bring us a prisoner and a bunch of any paper and computers you find we want.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you tell them that, and that's exactly what they'll do. They'll go in there, they'll kill anything that moves, except for the one guy. They'll beat the crap out of him. They'll put a sandbag on his head. They'll zip tie him, drag him out, and you'll come out with a laundry bag full of every scrap of paper that was in the building. They'll hand it to you. And that's awesome for military intelligence. But what we wanted was prosecutably usable information.
Yeah.
So I had to know that this piece of paper, this came out of Abu Bai's left front pocket, and he was in this room at this time. So we had to gather evidence and establish a chain of custody.
Which was a whole paradigm shift for the military. Right. The military was just like I said, going in, taking names, getting out.
Yeah.
And Bureau's like, well, if we're going to prosecute these folks or we're going to gain intel, we need to do the Bureau way, the Bureau of Investigation, the Bureau. And, oh, by the way, do it quickly. Because in the U.S., you serve a search warrant, you could do it for days. Over there, correct me if I'm wrong, you have minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, there were times I was searching a room and there was firefights in the next room. And there's a lot of value if I grab a guy and there's a scrap of paper in his pocket and there's a 703 area code phone number.
Interesting.
And I've got a sat phone and I can call while the compound is still being secure. I can call back to headquarters and go, hey, I got a phone number off of this, dead Tango, and it's 123456. And hours later, they've got a Title III up on that phone. And they're looking at who that is before that guy even knows that this guy's dead or captured in the bag or whatever.
Gotcha.
So it was incredibly valuable work when it worked out. And we were able to remove a lot of the weight off the military.
Yeah.
The other thing is, too, okay, you grab all this stuff, even if the military guy can testify to it, he might not be in court for 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
7, and he doesn't know the first thing about how to testify. And you're going to go find this guy, and by then he may be out of the Army, he may be, who knows where he's going to be, right? Well, the FBI agents know how to testify. We understand, look, you could end up testifying to this 10 years from now. And we've got all that training. So we will really be able to help them out. And then we also trained them in how to conduct these searches in a little bit more thorough and organized fashion. And then we could also start the interrogation process with these guys on the field. We had little thumbprint scanners that were just brand new. They're like a wand about yay big, and we could print them right there in the field.
And send it back.
Yep, send it right back. I mean, it was really, at the time, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Get digital photos uploaded and gone on the battlefield. Collect up DNA.
Data at the edge.
Yeah.
Really, right?
Right.
Yeah, it was really good. I felt really productive about it.
I just going back to what you're talking about with that story with Muhammad. I appreciate you sharing that because we live in this world. We don't have to talk about it at length, but people seem to be so desensitized to that like games that everyone plays. It's just you kill like 1 million people, right? And it hasn't really changed over the years. Or I'm watching like John Wick 4 the other day with my daughter, and in every movie he kills like 200 people in suits.
Kills more people than
It's almost
Napoleon.
like it's so like if that really were a thing, it would be a big thing. And it's like, oh, it's just the movies, and you don't even think about that guy that just got shot in a suit. Like it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
But then you have the people who won't talk about their time and people that maybe they killed and things. But I think sometimes we need to hear it, and it's a real thing, and it has a major effect on the person who had to pull the trigger, whether it was self-defense or war, whatever it is. This other stuff is just so it's desensitizing.
Yeah, it certainly can be. And one of the things that worried me, and I talk about it in that first book, is other combat occurrences that I had didn't particularly bother me at all.
Yeah.
I really didn't have a problem with it.
Just that one.
It was just that one. And I can tell you some details about other stuff. I don't, but I agree with you. I think that we need to extract what we can out of these events, as painful as that information is to come by. I think we need to get the information out of it so that we can conform our training to the realities of these gunfights.
Yeah.
Surviving, prepping beforehand, surviving the incident itself, and surviving the aftermath. Because I think when it comes to law enforcement especially, that's the single biggest responsibility we give these cops, is the taking of another human life without prior judicial review in situations that are fast-moving, terrifying, low information,
Yeah.
incredibly impactful, no matter how it works out. And we don't do the best job we could do in training.
Well, and it goes also with the stigma, right? Again, going back to your previous comment, which was, I'm not going to tell the Bureau that I'm seeing a psychiatrist for just talking through it. And, I mean, again, most law enforcement are type A personalities, and, I'm going to go through the door and whatever, and you may, once you've dealt with a situation like that, your buddies are going to say, what are you, a wimp? And again, that stigma of, hey, it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to go, go seek some help just to talk through the things you're going through. Hey, I'm not sleeping well at night. I'm reliving it, and how do I walk through that? And law enforcement in general has not done well of identifying and giving law enforcement help to walk through that.
It's absolutely true. The Bureau's right out front with that. But it's interesting. International Association of Chiefs of Police, which is a industry association, 30 years ago came out and said not only should there be post-shooting event counseling, it should be made mandatory because that removes the stigma of the officer saying, I need to go talk to somebody. You don't give them a choice.
Right.
You force them to do it. When I came and I started to say this, the Army had one set of reactions to my combat experience. The Bureau, vastly different. I came back. My supervisor at the time told me, right as soon as I got back, gave me no time off. And the Bureau eventually started giving you a week or some admin time. No time off. I got back on a Friday, and I had to be back in the office on Monday.
Jeez.
And he told me when I came back, he's like, okay, I let you go and play in Afghanistan for a couple months. Now I need you to get back here and do some work.
Oh, man.
And then he proceeded to sick OPR on me. I got OPR'd as soon as I got back. And for
Office of Professional
Yeah, it's
Responsibility.
our internal affairs.
Oh, okay.
And
Not Office of Personnel Resources.
No,
Different
no.
OPR.
Oh no!
No.
When you get that call, you're like, okay, now what?
He opened my credit card bill while I was gone and saw that I hadn't paid my credit card bill. Now, mind you, I know that's the exact expression I made. Before I got on the plane and flew to Afghanistan, I called the government credit card company. I said, look, I'm going to be in Afghanistan for the next several months. I cannot pay my credit card while I'm there because I do not have access to it. I do not have a computer. I can't. I'm freaking Afghanistan. I can't pay it. I will pay it as soon as I get back. And oh, by the way, I had to pay for a commercial flight over there. I can't pay for that out of pocket. I mean, it was thousands of dollars, right? I can't tell my wife, hey, I'm going to Afghanistan. And oh, by the way, it's going to cost you $5,000.
Yeah.
On my personal credit card.
Not going to do it. So I put it on the Bureau card, called them up, said, this is what's going to happen. Please make a note in my file. Okay. Well, if they made a note, they ignored it. So they started saying, hey, you're 30 days overdue, you're 60 days overdue, 90 days overdue. Well, my boss gets into my credit card while I'm gone, sees that I haven't paid my credit card, calls OPR.
But no,
He
right,
can't come
no.
into stat talk to you about it.
No. But it's not only that. I mean, he's gone. The front office knows he's gone, and they know that they're in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And
I-
they're gone.
and I'm supporting a military operation voluntarily
For the Bureau.
for the Bureau. Right. So
Somewhat unprecedented.
somewhat unprecedented, blazing new trails here.
Well, and again, it goes back to real quick is that because at the time there was a lot of agents that said, I'm never going to go there. I'm not. I mean, and that's okay too.
Sure.
I mean, that's okay. But, once they find people, hey, we want to go, okay.
A little bit of support would be nice.
Right.
So I come back and I get caught up right in that. And he asked me at one point, he's like, well, why didn't you just have, because I also purchased some things while I was in country from the PX. And he's like, well, I see you bought a backpack and you bought, a Camelback. And I was like, yeah, because my supervisor at the time told me, hey, there's some guys landing today. And then the Bureau wasn't issuing you gear when you
Yeah,
went.
right. They didn't.
They
right.
took us to REI the night before I flew.
Oh,
And I
wow.
bought a bunch of stuff at REI.
Right.
I had my own stuff that I brought with me. They told me to bring Big Blue. That was what killed me. We had these big blue bulletproof vests that we wore on FBI raids
Okay.
in the States. Makes perfect sense in the States.
Yeah.
To say, shoot me.
Yeah. Big target, right?
Right.
I'm going to
Shoot
go to
me target.
Afghanistan in a desert environment where this big blue thing with an FBI.
Where it says
yellow
FBI.
letters
Yeah,
FBI.
and oh, by the way, you can't take it off. It was
sewn on.
It's like sewn on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I got my own gear. Unfortunately, I'd had combat experience before, so I knew what to bring. Right? So I had a good idea. I was writing for gun magazines at the time, so I had some good contacts that I could call and get
Yeah.
stuff shipped like right now.
As Dan.
As Dan. Well, they knew who I was. It's none of
Bernoulli.
right, but I was able to get all this stuff that I wanted and needed. So I get over there, and I buy these things because my boss is like, "Hey, look, we got to get this stuff. These guys are hitting the ground this afternoon. I got to fly them to Kandahar. You know, this tonight. They need this stuff. Go down to PX and get it. Roger. Go down and get it. Give them their gear. I'll pay it when I get home." And or actually, what happened? He would get some money from the CIA, and they would, so we'd work something out.
Sure.
And my boss is like, "Well, why didn't you just use a purchase order?" I was like, "Well, because the nearest purchasing agent was, I don't know, 8,000 miles away in Miami, but he didn't want to hear that." So OPR came in and, they ended up spanking me for that. I got a couple days on the beach. I was just like, you know what? I was madder than hell at first. And
Wow.
finally, I was just like, you know what? Do what you got to do.
Almost shot.
I,
Could have been shot.
mortar attacks, rocket attacks. There was one day I was there.
And they gave you days on the beach for that
yeah.
too?
Oh, yeah.
Because you didn't pay your bill.
Yeah, sure did. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's...
It was maddening.
I would.
Absolutely
I mean, even the SAC should have said stop. Just stop.
The SAC got involved, and he came back and said, "I'm going to suspend your ability to have a secondary income source for writing these gun magazine articles because you called these people in the industry that you knew and had them sell you stuff and send it to you. I didn't get anything free. Everybody sold me stuff, but they sent it to you outside of normal channels. They sent it to you immediately, so no more." So I ended up losing money on that deal. Fortunately, I'd already finished my master's.
Jeez.
But so you can see where the difference is. And I'm not trying to throw rocks at the FBI. This is 20 years ago. I'm over it. It was insanely upsetting at the time, but I'm fine with it. But if you compare
Yeah.
what you think my mental state coming out of the Army combat environment versus mental state coming back to the Bureau after that, it fundamentally changes your relationship with the organization too. I mean, the Bureau of my father-in-law's time, my father-in-law retired in 2003, still wears his FBI pin every day, carries his FBI retired credentials every day, loves the Bureau. Asks my wife every day when he sees her, what's going on in the Bureau today? He wants to, that's his thing. I'm like, and he and I talk about it all the time. He says, you were in a different FBI than I was.
Yeah.
And our FBI changed, right? There was the
too.
pre-9/11 FBI and the post-9/11
Right.
FBI. And that event fundamentally changed my attitude about the FBI. After that, I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to go the extra mile for the Bureau unless there's some benefit, some tangible benefit for me. And that speaks to me. I mean, that's my issue. That's my failings. But it was a real bone of contention for me.
I did an episode with this lady, Rachel Sullivan. She has a Solid Ground Counseling. And one thing that we talked about in her big push, if you will, professionally, right? She's like, when I'm dead and gone, I want people just to remember me for mental health. And we talk so much about how it's negative in connotation, but no, mental health is like it's at either side of the continuum. It's extremely positive and healthy, or it's weak and it needs to be addressed. So if we could just change the way we address mental health, and it's like, hey, you came back from wherever, talk to somebody, and maybe it's, not going to be that big a deal for you, or it could be, right? But at least it's like everybody needs to work through these things emotionally. We all do.
Right. For me, my attitude was stitch in time, right? I'd rather have the stitch in time to save the 9.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times did we see growing up guys from Vietnam that popped their cork, or after Vietnam, 10
Yeah.
years, 15? And that's what I told the guy I was talking to. I was like, look, I think I'm in a pretty good spot right now. I'm kind of hyperactive. I balloon pops kind of put me on the floor, and I'm having some dreams. I said, but I think I'm in an okay spot. I want to be in a better spot because I don't want that splinter to infect and go septic. And 15 years from now, I'm mumbling to myself, living on the street, wearing desert BDUs. I don't want to be in that boat. I want to make sure that I get off that train as early as I can.
Yeah.
And to your point, I agree. If a law enforcement officer is in a shooting and he gets shot, takes one through the thigh, And he goes to the hospital and he gets treated. No problem. We're all like, yeah, of course you went to the hospital. You got treated. You got shot. You know, you got to get shots. You got to get stitched up. Make sure you don't go septic. Yada, yada, yada. Not an issue. Comes back to work and people are like, dude, took a round. All right. Yeah, good on you. That same officer doesn't get shot. Goes to see a psychiatrist. Now he doesn't tell anybody because he's having dreams.
Yeah.
He's having predictable impacts, right? We know that he's probably going to have a hard time sleeping. We know that he's going to have, maybe short-tempered. We know that, he may start drinking more, that he may be short with his wife and kids. He may be, more prone to, he may be hypervigilant. We know all of these things. And we didn't tell him that. Well, simply by the research shows if you tell him this is a potential coming down the pike, 60, 70% of the problems, they understand. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I get it. This is to be expected.
Almost like the stages of grief, right?
Exactly. An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, you're not weird because you're having this response. This is a normal response and this is what we can do about
1 second. You might be on the cord. You might just need to move your chair a little bit. You're fine on his video.
I'm going to grab another water if I can.
Oh yeah, please. Yeah, but meeting you, that was very helpful. I don't know how different this would be if and having you here is very helpful. Because I wasn't in the Bureau and I wasn't in the Army, and it's always nice to have someone who was, right? So that they can share their perspective, and you guys can,
Do the secret handshake. Oh, we didn't do that earlier.
No,
we'll
but
do it
it's a
later.
good thing the chips in our heads coordinated as soon as we got here.
Right.
Well, I was at the agency as a young contractor at that time, and
So did you know Snowden?
no, that was NSA, but we did some. I was very proud of what we did at the agency in support of things like catching and or mounting the evidence against someone
Ames
like
would have been
him.
before you, though, right?
Ames would have been, yeah. But then the underwear bomber, or was the shoe bomber? What was the one on the airplane?
Richard Reed.
No, 2009.
The shoe bomber was Richard Reed.
I think it was the underwear bomber on the airplane.
Yeah, he was later. I think the shoe bomber came first, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever, it was the Christmas of like 09.
Yeah.
That put like our group on the map. We did some incredible things in like a really short amount of time.
It's really cool when you get involved in stuff like that,
Yeah.
isn't it? And you kind of go, wow, we did that.
We did a
That's
lot,
awesome.
like, and then you started to realize that we bureaucracies, right? It's amazing how if you've never experienced being able to just do something and have hey, here's money, nothing is going to slow you down. Just do it, and you just do it. You get some smart people, and you knock it out.
Right.
Then I've been on the other side of it, where the most simple thing turns into a million review boards and this and that, and you're like, you've got to be kidding me. Yeah. And we always found a way to go around all that, or we would at least appease the system and kind of work, like pretend that we were working the bureaucracy, and we were already done.
Right. Render under Caesar when you have to.
But then we would brief as if, oh yeah, we're doing this thing. We were done.
yeah,
Because we did it a different way. We would have gotten in big trouble, but we didn't care.
September 12th in the FBI, man.
Oh, sure.
All doors were open. It was crazy. I mean, it was interesting to see early in my career like that, just what the Bureau could do.
Oh,
When
absolutely.
the bureaucracy
Right.
got out of the way. Holy mackerel. I mean, what was it, 2 days after the event? We knew so much about all of those bombers.
Right.
Yeah.
It was insane what we knew about
And then all the work that every field officer did during that time too, which was you're going to run down everything, because right after 9/11, then there was the potential of them using aircraft to crop dust WMD.
Yeah.
So we were running around finding the Bureau had to find all the crop dusters
I remember that.
and pilots in the country.
Wow.
And we had to track them all down. One of my buddies went to one here off of County Line Road, and he wasn't around, but his daughter was. And they said, well, where's Bob Smith? Oh, he's got a little Alzheimer's, and I'm glad you ran into me, because he probably would have shot you,
Oh, jeez.
you know?
Well, he would have tried.
Well, yeah. But, I mean...
He would have given it a go.
Right.
They're coming out with a movie for the DC Sniper.
Really.
I know we talked about that during
right.
our episode. What were you? Were you at the Bureau? No, you
No.
weren't there yet.
No, I was not. That was before. Well,
Or were
what
you?
year was it? Yeah, we were.
That,
2002?
You were there. It was 2002.
Yeah,
You
I
were
remember
there.
that. Yeah, but I was
Okay.
up in Vermont. And
Yeah.
I mean, I remember reading about it. I think I came down for an in-service in D.C. at the time. but that was about it. I have plenty of friends that worked it. Stewart in there in the book, he worked it. He was,
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, the SA or the ADIC, the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office at the time, and he was also ADIC at 9/11. His son was my last supervisor.
Oh, wow.
In Charlotte.
Did you know John Bavona?
No, but I've heard that name. I don't know why.
He was. He spent most of his, or I think most of the career up in New York City, but he would have been in infantry school with you at Benning.
Wow. That is going back a day or two.
Yeah. Anyhow.
Yeah, that's what happens all the
Yeah.
time when FBI agents get together. Oh, you were
Oh,
in such
yeah.
oh, you know, yeah.
I mean, I mean, with the event here the past couple days, it was like, oh yeah, you know.
Well, TC, when do you fly back, or when do you go home?
Oh, I drive home. Let's see, my wife's done with her class tomorrow, so Friday morning. We're bolting out of here. We're going to stay overnight up in Tennessee, and then we're going to finish up our drive back home.
Where in Tennessee?
Sevierville,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
Have you had a good time here?
Oh yeah, come on. I mean,
Where'd you take the kids?
well, Barnes and Noble, because they just love to read something.
Over at Bridge Street. Yeah.
My freaking kid, my son he's like a money magnet. This 8-year-old kid. We're
Oh,
driving-
just wait until they're 18 and 21.
Oh no! Oh, I got a 31-year-old. Believe me.
Oh, no.
But my this 8-year-old, we're driving along one time. He was 6. He looks out the window and he goes, "Dad, there's money." In my car, I'm doing 30 miles an hour. I'm like, "There's no money." He's like, "Dad, no, I see some money." All right, I'll tell you what, son. Let's see if there's money, because I'm that dad, right? So I pull over. It's at a gas station. I stop. He goes, "It's right down that hill," and I can't see down the hill. I'm like, "All right, son, go for it." His mother loses her mind if he's out of my sight. I'm just like, fine. He runs down the hill, comes back 30 seconds later. He's got a $20 bill in his hand.
Really?
I'm like, where? How? What?
Eagle Eye.
Yeah. So the other day we're in Barnes and Noble. I'm standing right next to this kid. He goes, "Dad, look what I found." He holds up a wad of cash.
Wow.
I'm like, and we're standing behind some guy that had just bought something. So I go, "Well, give me that." And I run after the guy and I say, "Hey, did you drop this?" He pulls his wallet. I said, "No, it's not mine." I said, "All right." I ask a few more people in the area at the bookstore, "Did you drop this? Did you drop this?" Now I'm fully expecting somebody to go, "Oh my, thank God,
Yeah,
my
that's
money.
mine. That's
Oh,
my
that's
money."
my cash." Yes.
How much was it? Oh, yeah, that's exactly
actually
what
what I
I
Yeah.
Nobody does. So we hang out in the Barnes and Noble for a while. Eventually go home. $45. Freaking kid just find 45. And he finds pennies and nickels, dimes all the time, but he's 45. So I go, "Wow, that's
Was
45."
he going to buy a lottery ticket?
Right. He says, "So
Not
what are we
in
going to do with it,
Alabama.
Dad?" I said, "Well, we asked around. We tried to give it back. It's yours now." He goes, "Okay." He takes the $45, 2 20s and a 5, and he turns to his 4-year-old sister. He goes, "Here, Mac." And he gives her $20.
There you go.
Wow.
And I'm like, situationally aware and generous. I am raising a human being that is so much better than I am.
There you go.
So, Barnes & Noble, Duluth Trading Company, the pool, just run around, parks. We were going to do more stuff today, but it rained all over us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just fun.
Well, and I'm not going to, TC, I'm not going to give you a big head, but you're doing something well with the kids too. I mean, because you had no good example. And so you're being a good example. I mean, because your kid didn't pick it up, out of the air that, hey, I need to take care of my little sister. And oh, by the way, I need to make sure that we check first where the money goes to.
Yeah.
he's
So-
he's a good little dude. I got to be honest. I put most of that down to his mom, but
Most, but not all.
most, but not all. Some of it. I mean, I'm just hyper aware of, okay, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I tell my older daughter, I said, "I did all my screw ups with you. I learned, So you're like your first pancake in the morning on a weekend, right? The first pancake is iffy. The rest of the pancakes are really,
Yeah.
really dialed in.
Well, I mean, but again, your older daughter talks to you, right?
She
I mean,
does.
and
She
she
does.
calls you, and I mean, again,
Shocking. Yeah, it's great. And
So-
it's funny because I've had that experience.
right?
I had these 2 little ones later on, and like so many people in the FBI, when I retired, there were opportunities available
Sure.
for going and working and making real money. And I said, "You know what? These 2 little people are going to be gone like that.
Yeah.
Right.
We all know how fast they're growing
Yep.
and gone." And I'm like, what's more important to me?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm comfortable. I've got enough. I
Right,
can do a
right.
little bit of consulting, some writing, make a little side scratch. But I'd much rather go to soccer games and go, "Hey, son, we're going to go work on footwork." I don't know the first freaking thing about soccer. I've always found it a ridiculous game, right? But
YouTube it.
I'm YouTubing it. I am getting more education on soccer by YouTube than ought to be
So
allowed by
let me
law.
just tell you this one.
Please.
My son, I had him soccer, and he didn't want to do soccer, and I'm like, okay. The thing that my son got into, which is growing down here, lacrosse.
Oh, yeah.
And where can you tell a teenage boy, here's a stick,
Go beat the crap out of people.
beat the crap out of somebody else, poke them, body check them, and oh, by the way, there's a ball and it's a game.
Right.
And lacrosse is, I mean, it's a quick moving game. It's not like baseball where, okay, we got 3 strikes, you're out, and then
We'll see you again in 20 minutes.
right.
Yeah.
Lacrosse, it's back and forth, pokes, body check,
Yeah.
So
Well, we think my youngest one, the 4-year-old, she's the honey badger of the family, so she'll probably be the field hockey or lacrosse one. But I'm hesitant to give her a stick because she's
she's
like,
going.
yeah.
Well, TC, it's been a pleasure having you, man.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you so very much.
welcome.
Appreciate you plugging the book. Appreciate you having me in.
Yeah, I normally would have time to read it, but I just found out last week, so
No
I'm
worries,
anxious.
no
You did
worries.
bring me a copy.
I hope you enjoy it.
Again, it is for our. Let me pull up the big one in front of the camera. Right,
Oh yeah.
Painting Over Rust. That's the new one, and
That's
then Dan, the book that's now retitled. What's the new title again?
No Safe Alternative.
No Safe Alternative.
That should be coming out within the next couple of months.
Okay.
You can find it. I've got tcfuller.com. I haven't built the website yet, so it'll probably be up there, and it'll certainly be available on Amazon.
And I'll link to your
Horse Group.
yeah to
Thank you.
to the Horus Group, to your books and every other links that you sent me.
Excellent.
I'll link those as well.
I do appreciate it. Thank you so
And
very much.
and all the are you still doing that live? Is it a live stream live podcast that you do with Rich?
Well, Rich does a
From time
coffee
to
with
time?
Rich.
Okay.
Rich Brown at the American Warrior Society does his
Right.
coffee with Rich, and he does that Mondays and Fridays.
Okay.
And I'm certainly available for him.
Yeah.
He's a good friend of mine, and if he wants me on, I'm on.
Yeah.
And so he calls when he calls, and I tend to have a flexible schedule, so
Yeah.
I can be there for him.
And Carrie, you enjoy yourself?
Oh,
It was fun.
always.
Look at that, almost 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours.
Wow,
It
impressive.
doesn't feel like it, does
It
it?
does not. Although my bladder is starting to tell me
Yeah,
it's probably
yeah.
close.
That and it's like I probably have to go to work tomorrow.
Oh yeah, you do.
And we're a little
Oh,
older
that's gonna
too.
suck. Right?
Well, and thanks for being patient with this new setup. But I think all in all, it worked out okay.
I did from my perspective.
I think I hit all the buttons, for the most part, and remembered, But no, I really appreciate your time. Safe travels, and
Thank you.
And quite frankly, are you coming back? You think
I will if I can.
When
I
you-
like Huntsville.
when you come back, let's just have you back on because
Okay,
there's so
that'd be
much
great.
more. There's so much more to get into,
Love to do it.
and I think that's generally the case I have with just about every guest. We don't get to it all, and I'm hoping to have anybody and everybody back on several times, right?
Excellent.
And give us an update on where you are in the story and other things going on.
I'd love to come back.
All right, man. All the best.
And to you.
Thank you,
Take
Carrie,
care.
as well.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks.
All right.